Okay, so today we're going to look into something that, is particularly relevant to your situation at work.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned that you're kind of dealing with the aftermath of a discrimination claim,
Hmm.
and this involves a high-performing employee,
Right.
and you're looking for ways to prevent this whole thing from happening again.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky situation, but the good news is that there are some, really proven strategies for rehabilitating employees in these types of scenarios.
Okay.
And what I thought was really fascinating about the two sources that you shared,
Hmm.
sympathy for the high-value narcissist rehabilitation of a biased manager, and this analysis brief on it called Rehabilitating High-Value Employees After Discrimination Claims.
Yeah.
They take a really unexpected approach.
Okay.
They almost treat discrimination like product liability.
Wait a minute, product liability. You mean like
Yeah,
a toaster that bursts into flames kind of thing?
exactly. Like if a company puts out a faulty product,
Uh-huh.
it causes some kind of harm,
Right.
they face lawsuits,
Hmm.
financial damage.
Makes sense.
Well, the sources argue that discrimination is essentially the same thing.
Wow.
It's a defect in the company's culture
Okay.
that creates liability.
I've never thought about it that way. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, when you put it like that, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You're talking about things like legal fees,
Mm-hmm.
settlements, a hit to the company's reputation.
Oh, yeah, all of it.
All of it adds up.
And those costs can be absolutely staggering.
Yeah, I bet.
One study actually found that the average cost of a discrimination lawsuit is over $250,000.
Wow.
And that doesn't even include intangible costs like damage to morale and productivity.
Ouch. That's a serious hit to the bottom line.
Exactly. And, one of the sources actually uses this really powerful quote.
Okay.
It says, "Valid civil rights and labor claims are a part of doing business. We must stop fearing them and learn to mitigate and eliminate our losses resulting from civil rights and labor claims, as we should be doing with product liability claims."
So basically, instead of, just reacting to these situations, we need to be more proactive.
Exactly.
We need to have systems in place to prevent these things from happening in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, like a company would rigorously test a product
Uh-huh.
before releasing it into the world.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be testing our company culture for potential discrimination defects.
Exactly.
Okay, this is all starting to click.
Good.
So in our case, we have this high-performing employee who's essentially like a defective product
Okay.
in the sense that they've engaged in this discriminatory behavior.
Right.
And the goal here is to kind of rehabilitate them so they don't create a similar liability in the future.
Exactly. And that rehabilitation process really involves a combination of accountability and support.
Okay, let's start with the accountability piece.
Okay.
What are some concrete steps that companies can take to make sure that the employee understands, how serious the situation is?
Well, the sources recommend starting with a formal meeting. But here's the thing. It shouldn't be like a legalistic deep dive into the specifics of the case
Oh, okay.
or like a gossip session about, who said what.
So we're skipping the drama and the
Actually,
legalese.
skip all that. Instead, the focus should really be on the impact of the employee's actions,
Got it.
like explaining how their behavior has harmed the company financially, legally, and reputationally.
So basically hitting them where it hurts their sense of being, a valuable contributor to the company.
Exactly. Many high-performing employees are driven by, results and success.
Mm-hmm.
So by framing this conversation in terms of business impact,
Yeah.
you're really speaking their language.
That's a really clever approach.
Hmm.
You're taking the emotion out of it, and you're focusing on the cold, hard facts.
Right. And once you've kind of established that sense of accountability, the next step is to create what's called a performance improvement plan.
A PIP.
Yeah.
A PIP.
I've heard of PIPs, but usually it's more in the context of like general performance issues.
Not something as serious as discrimination.
This is a specialized PIP.
Okay.
This is specifically tailored to address this discriminatory behavior.
Yeah.
It's all about setting clear expectations and establishing, a zero tolerance policy moving forward.
So no more second chances.
Exactly. This PIP needs to make it crystal clear that any further discriminatory behavior will result in serious consequences up to and including termination.
Okay.
But it's not all about punishment.
Oh,
It's also about providing the employee with the resources and support that they need
okay.
to make a genuine change.
That makes sense.
What-
What kind of support are we talking about here?
So the sources highlight several key elements.
Okay.
First, mandatory training.
Not just the usual compliance training that everyone groans about.
No, definitely not. This is specialized training that digs deeper into issues like unconscious bias, empathy, and cultural sensitivity. It's about giving the employee the tools to understand different perspectives and challenge their own assumptions.
So helping them see the world through a different lens.
Exactly. But training alone isn't enough.
Okay.
The sources also recommend mentorship.
Okay.
Pairing the employee with a senior leader who can provide guidance, support, and act as a positive role model.
Someone who can kind of help them walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Precisely. And finally, regular check-ins are absolutely crucial.
Okay.
This allows you to monitor progress, address any concerns, and make sure the employee is on the right track.
So it's about providing that accountability, but also continued support.
You got it.
So this whole rehabilitation process is really starting to make a lot of sense. We've covered accountability support and even this, specialized PIP.
Right.
It's like we're giving this high-performing employee like a second chance, but with, some really clear guardrails in place.
Yeah. It is a second chance, but one with a very strong emphasis on preventing future incidents. And, the sources that you brought in, they point to another really crucial element. Extending this product testing mindset beyond just the individual employee.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. Like, if a company has one faulty product, it raises questions about their whole manufacturing process. Maybe there are some, systemic issues that led to that defect.
So if one employee engages in discrimination, it could signal some, deeper problems with the company culture itself.
Exactly. One discriminatory act shouldn't be seen as just an isolated incident.
Oh, wow.
It might be a symptom of a broader cultural defect.
That's a really sobering thought.
It is, but it's also a huge opportunity.
Okay.
By using this incident as a catalyst, companies can start to debug their culture and create a system that's actually designed to prevent discrimination from happening in the first place.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting. How do you go about, debugging an entire company culture?
Well, the sources outline a multifaceted approach. It starts with leadership. If the people at the top aren't walking the walk and demonstrating a genuine commitment to diversity and inclusion, then nothing else really matters.
It's like that old saying, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. And beyond leadership, there needs to be a culture of open communication. Where employees feel safe reporting concerns without fear of retaliation.
So creating a space where people feel heard and respected?
Precisely. But it can't just stop there.
Okay.
The sources also emphasize the need for regular policy review.
Oh, okay.
The world is constantly changing, and so our understandings of discrimination, what might have been considered acceptable a few years ago, might not be acceptable today.
So it's about staying ahead of the curve, not just reacting to problems after they occur.
Exactly. And another key element is recognition. Companies need to celebrate and reward employees who exemplify inclusive behavior.
So showcasing the positive role models, not just punishing the, bad apples.
Right. But you also need accountability.
The rules need to apply to everyone, regardless of their position or performance level.
No special treatment for star performers. If someone crosses the line, there need to be consequences.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And by focusing on these key elements, leadership, communication, policy review, recognition, and accountability, companies can really create a culture that's truly resistant to discrimination.
Okay, this is a lot for companies to take in.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking of our listener, someone who's kind of dealing with the situation right now. What can they do as an individual to make a difference?
That's where the concept of individual fiduciary responsibility comes in.
Okay.
We usually think of fiduciary duty in terms of a company's legal obligations. But the sources argue that it also applies to individual actions.
Okay, that's a new one for me. How does fiduciary responsibility apply to someone who's not a CEO or a board member?
It really boils down to this. Every employee is a steward of the company's resources. And we're talking about financial resources. But also things like reputation and the well-being of other employees.
Exactly. And we have a duty to protect those resources. Discrimination harms those resources. So it's a violation of that duty.
So even if you're not the one making company-wide decisions, you still have a personal responsibility to prevent discrimination.
Precisely. And the sources go deeper into that responsibility by breaking it down into 3 core principles. Duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience.
Okay, let's unpack those.
Yeah.
What does duty of care look like in action?
Duty of care basically means acting with the same level of diligence and prudence that a reasonable person would exercise in a similar situation.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of discrimination, this means educating yourself about the relevant laws, understanding different forms of discrimination, and taking steps to prevent it.
So no more, I didn't know that was discriminatory excuses.
Because you have a duty to be informed and make sure your actions align with the law and company policy.
Makes sense. What about duty of loyalty?
Duty of loyalty means acting in the best interests of the company.
Okay.
And as we've discussed, discrimination is terrible for business.
Right.
It's costly,
Mm-hmm.
it's damaging,
Yeah.
and it creates a toxic environment.
Makes sense.
So preventing discrimination becomes a key part of your loyalty to the company.
So it's about recognizing that your actions,
Right.
even seemingly small ones, have consequences for the entire organization.
Exactly. And finally, there's the duty of obedience.
This one sounds pretty straightforward.
It is duty of obedience simply means following the rules.
Okay.
This includes all applicable laws, regulations, and company policies, especially those related to anti-discrimination and anti-harassment.
So no cutting corners or thinking you're above the rules.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And when you combine these three principles, duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience, you have a really powerful framework for guiding your individual actions and creating a more inclusive workplace.
I love how this all ties back to that initial analogy of discrimination as product liability.
Yeah.
It's like we're all responsible for quality control, making sure that we're not contributing to a defective workplace culture.
Exactly. And the sources actually provide some really practical steps that individuals can take to fulfill those responsibilities.
Okay, let's hear them.
Yeah.
What can our listener and all of us really do on a day-to-day basis to make a difference?
It starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
We all have biases, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
The first step is to acknowledge that and start paying attention to how those biases might be influencing your thoughts and actions.
So taking a long, hard look in the mirror.
Exactly. And there are some great tools that can help with this.
Oh, okay.
We talked about the implicit association test.
Yeah.
But there are also books, articles, workshops, tons of resources out there to help you explore your own biases and learn how to mitigate their impact.
So it's about being willing to learn and grow and challenge your own assumptions.
Absolutely. And once you've started developing that self-awareness, the next step is to really focus on building empathy.
We touched on this earlier, but it's worth, digging a little deeper.
Yeah.
How can people actively cultivate empathy?
One of the simplest but most powerful ways is to just listen.
Okay.
Really listen. When someone shares their experiences or perspectives, try to see the world through their eyes.
So putting yourself in their shoes, even if you don't necessarily agree with them?
Exactly. It's not always easy.
Right.
But it's so important to be willing to listen and learn from those who are different from you.
It's about recognizing that everyone has a story to tell and that we can all learn from each other's experiences.
Absolutely. And another great way to build empathy is to seek out opportunities to interact with people from different backgrounds. This could mean like volunteering, joining a new group, or even just like striking up conversations with people you wouldn't normally talk to.
So getting outside of your comfort zone and kind of expanding your circle a little bit.
Precisely. The more exposure you have to different cultures and perspectives, the more empathy you'll develop.
It's like expanding your worldview one conversation at a time.
Exactly. And once you've started developing self-awareness and empathy, you can start taking some more concrete steps.
Okay.
Being mindful of your language is a big one.
Okay.
Words have power.
Yeah.
Even seemingly harmless jokes or comments can perpetuate stereotypes and make people feel uncomfortable.
So thinking before you speak and being aware of the impact that your words can have.
Exactly. It's not about being politically correct.
Right.
It's about being respectful and considerate of the people around you.
Yeah. Creating a positive and inclusive environment.
Precisely. Another really important step is challenging discrimination when you see it. This can be tough, especially if it's coming from someone in a position of power.
Yeah. Speaking up can be hard.
Yeah.
But it's so important.
It is. Yeah. And you don't have to be confrontational about it.
Okay.
Sometimes simply asking a question or expressing concern can make someone think twice.
So it's about starting a dialogue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, one of the most powerful things you can do is be a role model for inclusive behavior.
Okay.
This means treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background. It means speaking up for those who are being marginalized and challenging discrimination whenever you see it.
So walking the walk and setting a good example for others.
Precisely. And when enough people start doing these things, it can create like a ripple effect that can transform entire workplaces.
This is so inspiring. It feels like we're talking about a movement, not just a set of rules.
I agree. And the best part is that anyone can be a part of this movement. It doesn't matter your job title or how much power you have. We can all make a difference by being mindful, building empathy, and speaking up.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We've really dug into what it means to create a truly inclusive and equitable workplace.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on one more point that the sources emphasized, the importance of ongoing learning and development.
That's crucial.
Yeah, this isn't like a one-and-done situation.
Right.
The world is constantly changing, and so is our understanding of diversity and inclusion.
It is.
So staying curious and continuing to educate ourselves.
Exactly. There are always new things to learn, new perspectives to consider, and new ways to improve our behavior.
Like being a lifelong learner when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
Precisely. And the good news is there are tons of resources out there to help us on this journey.
Oh, good.
Books, articles, podcasts, workshops, online courses, you name it.
So there's really no excuse for not staying informed and engaged.
Exactly. And the more we learn, the better equipped we'll be to create workplaces that are truly welcoming and inclusive for everyone.
This has been such an inspiring and informative conversation.
Yeah.
We've talked about the big picture and the individual steps that we can all take to make a difference.
I completely agree. I'm really glad we had this conversation.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It feels like we've really flipped this whole idea of discrimination on its head. We're not just talking about, the legal stuff. We're really talking about like a fundamental shift in how we think about workplace culture.
It's a paradigm shift for sure. And the sources, they really highlight that by emphasizing how interconnected everything is, like company policies, individual actions, legal frameworks, ethical considerations. They all weave together to create like the fabric of a workplace culture.
It's like we've been looking at a tapestry. At first, like the individual threads, and now we're stepping back and we're seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. And what's so powerful about that approach is that it acknowledges how complex this issue really is. There's no easy fix or magic bullet.
It's an ongoing process, like a continuous commitment to building something better.
Precisely. And that's where the final piece of this puzzle comes in. This idea of creating a culture of collective fiduciary responsibility.
We've talked about individual fiduciary duty, but this sounds like it's taking things to a whole new level.
It is. It's about moving beyond just individual actions. Creating a system where everyone feels responsible for protecting the company's resources and preventing harm.
So it's like a shared sense of ownership, a collective commitment to doing the right thing.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If everyone in a company sees themselves as like a steward of the company's well-being, discrimination becomes everyone's problem to solve.
So it's not just about avoiding lawsuits or bad PR. It's about creating a work environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and safe.
Precisely. And when that happens, when everyone feels invested in building a truly inclusive culture, that's when you start to see real lasting change.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
We've explored, so many layers from the legal and financial implications of discrimination to the individual and collective actions that we can take to prevent it.
It's been a really rich discussion, and I hope our listener is walking away with a renewed sense of hope and, a clear understanding of their own power to make a difference.
Me too. And before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier, this idea of a paradigm shift. It feels like that's what these sources are really calling for, like a fundamental change in how we view discrimination in the workplace.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that discrimination is not just a legal or ethical issue. It's a business issue, a human issue, and ultimately a reflection of our shared values.
And by taking like a proactive, strategic, and holistic approach, we can create workplaces that are not only equitable and inclusive, but also more successful and innovative.
I couldn't agree more. It's a win-win for everyone involved.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to bring our deep dive to a close. Thank you so much for, sharing your expertise and insights.
My pleasure.
I feel like we really uncovered some hidden gems in these sources.
We did.
And remember, even small actions can have a big impact.
They can.
By committing to ongoing learning, building empathy, and speaking up for what's right, we can all contribute to a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely.
Well, we hope this deep dive has equipped you with the knowledge and the inspiration to create positive change in your own workplace. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to make the world a better place.